black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Apologize a little bit for my voice. Fozzy came to town, which is Chris Jericho's band, and they were here in Portland, and I went and hung out with Chris and the band. Billy, if you're listening, thank you, brother, for listening. Very cool guys, and we hung out and did a little podcasting, so look for yours truly showing up on Talk is Jericho. Chris, thank you again. And thank you guys for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be talking to Ronnie. And Ronnie and his wife and his father all ran into this creature. And it was mainly Ronnie and his wife when this thing attacked the van that they were in. Very fascinating encounter. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And then I'll also be talking to Shane, and Shane was out with his family, and his wife and his son had actually seen the creature. Very fascinating account. What you'll notice in both of these accounts tonight is two completely different personalities with the creatures, and you're not really sure what sets these things off. If you get a chance, check out SasquatchChronicles.com. You can become a member, get additional shows. I'm not actually on YouTube, so if you're listening to it on YouTube, it's not actually me putting it up there, but that's a whole different story. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Ronnie to the show. Ronnie, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Wes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. Kind of bear with me and my voice tonight. It's kind of going in and out. Spent too much time having too good of a time last night. If you would you kind of start from the beginning? It's a very fascinating encounter, and I know you were trying to reconnect with your dad, and a very terrifying encounter. If you would, for the audience, kind of start from the beginning. Walk us into this whole situation. What did you experience?
Okay. I was living in Utah back in 2015, and my dad had gave me a call. I hadn't talked to him in a few years, and he was trying to get in touch with me. He wanted to work on the relationship with me and him, and he wanted me to come out and live with him in Anderson, South Carolina, and said that he'd give us a place to stay, and an old trailer or something we could fix up. Thought it'd be nice if I come out and lived with him until we got it up and fixed up, and we could just move in and kind of be closer to my dad. So weeks went by and everything just kind of fell into place, and we decided to catch a Greyhound and go out. And he picked us up at the Greyhound station. We moved out there into his trailer. His trailer's like right out in the middle of nowhere. It's a 14 by 70 trailer. It's back an old gravel road, and he doesn't have power to his house. He runs generator power. The only time he ever runs it is at nighttime when he runs his air conditioners and fans and stuff like that. Kind of keep the windows open for the air to blow through, to kind of keep the trailer cool. The daytime, it's kind of, it's kind of hot. You just sit in front of a fan or get you a cold rag put on your head, but that's pretty much it. So anyway, my wife and I got out there, and she didn't realize how far we was going to be out in the middle of nowhere, and she's from the city, so she decided, she wanted to get out and do something. So I asked my dad if we could borrow his van and go out on the town and kind of check things out, and we decided to go watch a movie. So we went and watched a movie, and it was probably around 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning when we started making our way back. And we got on the road there that leads to his house and, rode out through that way, and then got out on the driveway, and then pulled up into the driveway and was sitting out in the driveway with the van shut off and the windows rolled down, and smoking us a cigarette because my dad doesn't allow smoking in his house. So we're sitting there, and my wife says something catches her eye off in the corner over there in the back part of the yard. There's a street light that just lights up the back part of the property. And she says that she sees something off in the distance that caught her eye. Said she seen somebody running. I really didn't see it, so I just kind of asked her what she said, and she said she seen some guy or something run through the woods. And so we just kind of left it at that, And I would say probably no more than a couple of seconds later, like on my side of the van, we heard this loud whoop. I mean, it let out this loud whooping sound, and it was so loud that it rattled the van. I froze. I thought I was going to have a heart attack the way it made me feel. My heart was in my feet. My wife completely freaked out to the point to where she took her seatbelt off and laid down in the floorboard. So I was panicked because I didn't know what was outside my window, and my window was down. So there was nobody, that we could get a hold of, at the time, because my dad was in the house and the air conditioner was going, and I knew that he couldn't hear me if I hollered. I sat there for a few seconds, and then I thought to myself, what could I do, to try to avoid this thing? And then the whole while, this thing is making noises. It's growling. And then I tell my wife to take my seatbelt, unclip my seatbelt. So she reaches up and unclicks my seatbelt, and I slide my seatbelt off around my head and then around onto my other arm. And then I tried to, pull it off. And I told her, I said, look, when I get this thing's attention, I'm going to, shine the brake lights. When I get this attention, I want you to jump out of the van and run toward the trailer. About the time that I tell her to do that, this thing starts hollering again, and then it starts making this vocal, it starts making this jabbering noise, just going crazy. And it grabs the van and starts shaking the van. So I hit the brake lights and I light this thing up. And when I look back to see what's going on, I see this figure. It's about 7.5 to 8 feet tall. This thing is humongous. It's brown. It's completely covered in fur from head to toe. You can't see nothing but on its head, where the side peripheral that I called of it, the only thing you could make out was his right around his eyes. You couldn't see no chin. It was just all hair, covered in hair.
Yeah.
I would say probably maybe 3 to 4 feet wide. Then next thing I know, my dad steps out on the porch and shoots his shotgun off once, and this thing looks over at him and then rocks the van, and then my dad shoots off 2 more times, and then this thing takes a step toward the back of the van and then one leap and leaps over the driveway and into the woods. And me and my wife jump out of the van and we run toward the trailer, and I holler at my dad not to shoot. and, tell him it's us. And then we run up on the porch and into the house and shut the door. And I asked my dad if he had ever seen anything like that. And he said he'd never, in the 40 years that he'd lived there, he said he'd never seen nothing like that before in his life. Anyway, we're sitting there in the trailer, and my dad, my wife, she's scared to death. She's at the point she's crying. And, my dad's like, well, you all just lay down here in the living room. And, he tells us to go back there and close the windows and stuff like that. So I go back there to the back part of the trailer and start closing all the windows. I come back into the living room. My dad's like, well, look, I'm going to go back in here and lay back down. If you all hear anything, let me know. So my wife's like, well, why don't we just go back there and stay in your dad's room? And I told my wife, I was like, he's gone now. There ain't nothing going to show up. He's already gone. And my wife was like, really persistent. She wanted to go back there and go to pallet. Well, my dad sleeps in his underwear, and I didn't want her to be back there, of course, in his underwear. So I was like, we'll be okay, So I finally got her in, to where she'd go back there and get in this bed that my dad had fixed up for us in the room. Well, in our room, the window's open, and we got a fan that we keep in the window. And that's what we plug into the extension cord and run it out there to the generator, and we, run it to the nighttime. So anyway, we're laying there in the bed kind of talking and going over what all we've seen, and I'm trying to calm my wife down, and she won't sleep by the window. She tells me she wants me to sleep by the window. And so we switched places, and I'm laying there beside the window, and I'm, holding her and trying to calm her down and stuff like that. So she finally dozes off. Well, I lay there for probably 10 more minutes, and, I'm thinking to myself, what I just seen, and trying to go over, everything that I witnessed and everything. And just as I doze off, I hear something hit the side of the trailer. So, I jump up out of the bed. My wife, she jumps up out of the bed. She's scared to death again. She's hollering, it's back, stuff like that. We run out of the room and down the hallway, and we trip over books, buckets of paint that my dad's got in the hallway, his shoes, whatever was in the floor. We kicked it and just ran plumb through the whole house, tripped over the recliner, and got in the living room. My dad had come out of his room again, and he said, asked us what the noise was, and I said, that thing is back. My dad went back in his room and got his gun and come back out, walked outside and off the back porch there and shot into the air. And, kind of made some ruckus and stuff like that. And then we sat in the kitchen for a few minutes, and I told Dad, I said, look, Dad, I said, it threw some stuff at the back part of the trailer. And I said, it was right there by the window. And I said, it busted the fan. So me and Dad, we walked back there into his bedroom, and Dad said, well, here, look, we'll go around here on the back side of the trailer and see what's going on. So Dad gave me a 12-gauge shotgun. He got his 12-gauge shotgun, and me and him walked out the back part of the trailer through the little fenced-in area there, and then around to the right, and then back around to where my bedroom window's at. And the box fan was completely busted on the corner part. I mean, it had shattered the whole corner of the fan where it threw that rock. And then on the aluminum side, there was two big rips in the aluminum side where these rocks had been thrown at the aluminum side. And the grass in my dad's yard, it's sort of high, it's not been cut in a while. But anyway, these rocks were so big that, like, you could see them in the grass. They were so big they were laying the grass over to the side, I would say probably the size, they were probably about the size of a pie pan. If I had to, give you
some big rocks.
Size or whatever. Yeah. So, we seen what was going on, and, my dad, and me, we made our way back to the trailer and got in the house, and Dad said, you guys, come in here and build a pallet in my room, and, first thing in the morning, we'll go out and check things out, So the next morning, we woke up. I went in the kitchen. Dad was in there fixing a pot of coffee. we went in the kitchen there, and I, I told my dad, I said, let's try to talk to him about it. And he said, when daylight gets on, when daylight comes around, he said, what we'll do is we'll go out there and shut the generator off. And he said, we'll go out there and try to check this thing out and see what all, the tracks and stuff like that out in the yard. So, it got daylight, and about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we went out there, shut the generator off, and then walked out there to where my van was at. And the van, where it had grabbed the van, it had bent the metal of the door where the sliding door is on the van. It had bent it down where it had grabbed it and rocked the van. And you could see like indentions in the soil, because the sand in South Carolina is like a red tint, and it's got like a sandy texture to it. But you could see where its feet was in the sand. Not complete full footprints, but you could see where the top part of the foot was at. And then so we kind of tracked it around the back of the van, and then went over to the edge of the woods there where the driveway, by the side of the driveway there, and looked over in the woods, and feathers were all over the back part of the woods there. And Dad had noticed that it had got one of his chickens. We went and to see all the dootlers. He had a couple stags and some dootlers running around, and the yearlings that he had that year. He figured it was a rooster because of he'd counted all of his chickens and stuff like that. He had a big problem with chicken hawks and stuff like that, but he had got pretty much all that stuff squared away. No chicken hawks would come around his property because he'd always shoot at them and stuff like that. So he noticed that it was it was something that had got his chickens. It had just got him that day, because he were the place where it had went into. There's a little patch of woods, and then right there beside that patch of woods is where my dad parked his tractor, and he's always back there fooling around, stuff like that. If there would have been feathers back there, he would have noticed it, so it had to have been that night. So
what did you think was going on at this time? Obviously, it's not a man. It's not a monkey.
Oh, I mean, well, I can tell you this much, Wes. I knew that this thing, it wasn't there to be nice. You know what I mean? Whenever it was happening, of course, all this took place in a matter of minutes. I mean, it wasn't like it lasted for an hour or nothing like that. I mean, it happened, and then it was over in an instant. But, man, it felt like an eternity, man. I mean, I thought that this thing was going to snatch me out of the van, man. I mean, I had my seatbelt on, but, when I took the seatbelt off, I'd made a mistake. But, I thought that if I'd left my seatbelt on, that, you know what I mean, this thing would have ripped me in half trying to get me out of the van, you know what I mean? And I thought that if it was going to jerk me out of the van, at least I'd come out in one piece. I wouldn't be ripped in half, and I'd also had intentions of going out on my wife's side of the van, you know what I mean? So.
What did you think this thing actually was?
Well, I mean, at first, I didn't know what it was. I mean, at first, like I said, I didn't know what to think. I thought my dad had probably played a prank on me. And then when I lit the back of the van up and I looked back and seen it, because, I mean, it was so close to me that I could have reached back and grabbed it. You know what I mean? I could have leaned out of the van, if I would have turned around in my seat and then been facing the seat, I could have reached out the van and grabbed it by the hair. That's how close it was to me. Once I seen how big the thing was, I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that there's no way that a human being could have filled a costume like that. I mean, it just, you know what I mean? There was no way. The way this thing moved, yeah, and the noises it was making. My wife, she's sitting right here. She can tell you, you know what I mean? The noises it was making, there's no way, you know what I mean? People say that these things are, friendly and nice, and that, they got it as wrong as two left shoes, buddy. These things ain't nothing but killers, man. I mean, they got one thing in their mind, and that's to eat. You know what I mean?
I tend to agree with you. Did you notice any smell or anything being that close?
Yeah, I did. I smelt like a rotten meat, like a putrid meat smell. And I also, it was a mixture between that and like a body odor, like armpit smell. You know what I mean? Like somebody's armpits that hadn't took a bath in a couple of days. It just, but the body odor smell wasn't as stout as the meat smell. Like the meat smell, it stunk. So it smelled like a deer carcass. You know what I mean? Like something that had been outside in the sun for a few days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And it makes me wonder what actually set that creature off. Why did it focus in on you guys? And why
I don't have a clue. Because, I mean, it wasn't like we were playing music loud or, we wasn't hollering or nothing like that. We actually, when we pulled into the driveway, I shut the van off and I had the radio on, but it was on real low. You know what I mean? Just enough where me and my wife could hear it. And we were just sitting there smoking cigarettes, talking. I mean, we wasn't, like I said, we wasn't being loud. We wasn't doing nothing to provoke it at all. You know what I mean? Nothing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, during your encounter, how you mentioned the chatter. And as you and I were talking earlier,
yeah.
I don't think the chatter is meant for you. I think the chatter is meant for another creature nearby. But did you guys get a sense there was more than one creature, or was your sense there was only this one?
Wes, I mean, to tell you the truth, buddy, if I told you that I seen more than one, I'd be lying to you, man. All we seen was the one. You know what I mean? Now, there could have been more, but I didn't see it. All I seen was one.
Yeah, and what bothers me, too, is it's not normal behavior from any creature, really. I mean, Sasquatch aside,
right? From
any creature. Let's say that it was, as you and I talked earlier, Ronnie, if it was a grizzly bear, for example, and your dad stepped out.
Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt in my mind this wasn't no grizzly bear. We've been to the zoo and stuff like that, and I've actually my stepdad is from New York, my brother's dad, and I've been out there in Plattsburgh, New York, and been hunting with him and hunted black bear and stuff like that. And, no, and a grizzly bear, this thing would have towered over a grizzly bear. I mean, I just, there was once I looked back and I made visual contact with this thing, like when I looked at it, there was no doubt in my mind that it was nothing. I mean, it was a Sasquatch. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind. I didn't think it was a bear. I didn't, I didn't think it was a moose. I mean, I knew what I was looking at. I mean, it was walking on two legs. You know what I mean? I mean,
yeah,
this thing it wasn't like it hopped up on two legs and walked over to the van. This thing was on, it had run past the van. My wife had seen it run past the van. You know what I mean? And so it had already had it in its mind, I believe, that I believe it seen us pull up, and I believe that it was trying to stalk around us and get around to the driver's side.
No, I agree with you. My point is that any normal predator, once you fire off a shotgun, humans included, they know what that sound is, and that's the sound to leave. Because someone's firing off a shotgun. And the crazy part about these creatures is I don't think they're quite as terrified of firearms as people claim they are. I don't think it shakes them up as much. But you see kind of a vengeance streak in their personality, don't you? For it to leave. And then
I think the same thing. And I think, like you said, when he heard that gun go off, I don't think that it scared him as much as it surprised him. You know what I mean? I think he thought that maybe we were the only ones there. You know what I mean? And maybe he was going to get him a free meal right there or something like that, because he wasn't trying to get in the van. I mean, if he wanted in that van, he could have got in that van easily. You see what I'm saying? He could have got in there, no problems, no questions about it. But I think that he wanted to run me and her out of the van.
Yeah, and run you guys down like prey.
he wanted to run us. He wanted to get us to run out of the van and I mean, you know, and that actually makes sense, because what if there was another one in the woods, you know, on my wife's side? You know what I mean? Because anybody in their right mind wouldn't have tried to get out on the side where he's at. We would have tried to go out on the opposite side. You know what I mean?
You hear a lot of accounts like this where they'll walk up and obviously someone's in the car and they'll shake the van, or they'll do something. They do this in homes too, where they could obviously kick in the front door or come in and do whatever they want. Same thing with cars. He could have ripped the door off, taken you, your wife. There'd have been nothing you could have done. But it's almost like the thrill, the kill. Sometimes you want the thing to get out and run. I mean, I hate saying that, but what other purpose is there besides to terrify you than to get you guys to exit the vehicle and run?
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, you know, Wes, the main thing that I want people to know, man, is, you know, these creatures, they're wild, man. And, you know, I know a lot of people want to think that they're cuddly and that, you know, it's just, you know, something out in the woods that they could possibly go up and pet or something like that if they run across it. But that's not what you want to do with this animal right here. These animals are meant to stay. You need to stay as far away from these things as possible. I'm talking a grown man. You know, you've got no chance against these things. You know what I mean? And like I said, if they wanted me and her, they could have had me and her by ripping that door off. You know what I mean? And like I said, I mean, you're better off to, you know, not try to interact with these things, you know, by trying to track them down in the woods and stuff like that, because one of these days, I mean, you know, somebody's going to go out there trying to look for one of these things, and you know, they're going to get what they asked for.
No, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's the old saying I say to a lot of these Bigfoot researchers that go out and do calls to try and bring them in. And what are you going to do if one comes in? I mean, honestly, what are you going to do if one comes in?
Exactly.
And then what are you going to do if it comes in? It's pissed off. You know what I mean? It's like your music ain't going to help you at that point. Your apples aren't going to help you at that point.
No.
Good luck to you. You know, Godspeed. I hope, you know, and you see the behavior with this.
The way this thing took off, I mean, the driveway that, my dad's driveway, if you're standing in the middle of my dad's driveway, I mean, it's just a regular old driveway. It's a dirt driveway, but, over the time, you know, it's been watered out by water and just, you know, tractors going up and down and stuff like that. So it's got a good, I would say probably 15, 20 feet across, you know, 20, maybe 25 at the most. You know, I'm just going off memory here, but, this thing cleared that driveway with one leap. You know what I mean? I mean, it took one step from the back of my van. It took one step. And then from the back of my van, you know, it could have took another step, but I didn't see it take another step, man. I mean, and it was gone like that. So, you know, these things could close in on you. Really, I'm talking like in a matter of seconds, they could close in on you. And when it ran by the van on my wife's side, I mean, we never heard a stick break. We never heard a leaf crunch, nothing. You know what I mean? And it was on us before we even knew what was going on.
Did your dad ever experience anything like this on the property before?
My dad said he had lived there for, you know, around 40 years. And he said that he had heard, you know, some strange noises and stuff like that, like some hollers and stuff. But he said he had never actually seen anything like that. You know what I mean? I tried to talk to him about it, you know, you know, a few days later and stuff like that. But it was almost kind of like he didn't want to believe what he's just seen. You know what I mean? It was kind of like he was trying to just put it out of his mind because he lives back there by himself. You know what I mean? And I would say that, you know, him back there by himself, he probably, you know, scared shitless that something like that could come in on him. You know what I mean? I bet he locks his doors at nighttime now. I bet he don't leave them open like he used to.
Yeah, and I know you don't have contact anymore with your dad. A normal question to ask is did it ever come back? But the answer is you don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know. But like I said, I mean, the area that he lives in, I mean, it would be prime area, you know what I mean? For something like that to live, which, I mean, there is houses there, and there's a highway right there beside, on the other side of the wood thicket there. But,
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't mean
it'd be perfect for a place.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to press Ronnie. That's a normal question.
No, you're good, brother, man. You're good. Like I said, man, my main thing, man, is like I said, I'm glad to be able to tell, what I know, you know what I mean, and get it out there,
No, I'm really glad to have you come on. I'm really glad that you're here. What's your honest opinion, Ronnie? What do you think that these things are?
Now, I mean, I have what my heart tells me is, if these things are something that's been here since the beginning of time, it could be something that that the good Lord created. I don't know. I mean, maybe the first version of man, but my heart wants to tell me that it's something that the government or something, has cooked up, because it doesn't seem natural for something like this right here to be running around, and you know what I mean. And it don't seem. I mean, it's right up there with aliens and the Loch Ness monster. You think that none of that stuff's real until you see it face to face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you mean. It's kind of like if you've never seen a gorilla before and someone showed you a gorilla, you'd be like, "Oh, that seems natural."
Well, yeah, I mean,
or if you saw a chimpanzee.
Look here, Wes. I tell you what, then this is just me and you. But if somebody would have told me that Sasquatch was real before I seen it, I would have laughed plumb out of my chair. You know what I mean? And to this day, like, my mom and my uncles and stuff like that, my grandmother's told us stories about Bigfoot and stuff like that, about her brothers having encounters, but that was back early 40s and 50s and stuff like that. But we always heard stories, but, it was just stories, you know what I mean? And, you never really, I mean, it's like, when you see something like that, I mean, it takes everything you thought you knew and it flips it upside down, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you just open up Pandora's box, man, and you think, if that could be real, then what's to say all these other people out here that's talking about, encounters with aliens and stuff like that, I know you got crackpots out there, but there's some honest to good people out here, man.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
That's really had stuff happen to them.
It does feel very unnatural. I tend to agree with you on that. It feels like something, it would make you feel better sleeping at night going, well, it's probably a natural monkey out there running around. But deep down, it feels very unnatural. It feels like it doesn't belong.
Right. I mean, exactly. It's not, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's not something, it's not like, I just don't know how to explain it, man. It's not something natural. You know what I mean? It's something that should be on another planet, or, you know what I mean? Or,
yeah. Yeah.
Or from another dimension or something other. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. I tend to agree with you. It definitely doesn't feel like it belongs. And, to get the reaction, like you said, I mean, for this thing, you guys are doing absolutely nothing. And I've had people who've had encounters like this, Ronnie, where they're not doing anything to provoke anything.
Right.
And all of a sudden, basically, you guys were attacked, but I mean, it basically attacked the van, but for no reason. For no reason.
Yeah.
And then for it to come back, that shows a different level of intelligence, because a predator, you fire off shots at a predator and it runs off. Yeah. It's not going to come back later and go, I'm going to teach you a lesson.
I can tell you this, when it was chattering, or whatever that is that you called it, when it was making that gibberish noise, like, I mean, I know in the back of my mind that thing had something to say, but I just, we couldn't understand it. You know what I mean? At the time, I just thought maybe it was having a fit or something like that. You know what I mean? I just thought maybe, it's just part of its its demeanor when it's in an aggressive situation or something like that, But the more I got to thinking about it, that thing was it was a complete different tone than the whoops and the like it made this noise with its voice like it was like almost kind of like how like an Indian would go but it was like a lower pitch sound, you know what I mean? And you could just tell that noise that it was going bark, 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 that was a different tone. You see what I'm saying? It was hitting high and low tones when it was doing that,
Did you feel like it was directed at you?
Well, when it was doing that, I couldn't see it because it was behind, it was behind my peripheral. But, I don't know. I don't know if it was or if it wasn't, you know what I mean? It could have been, but, like I checked it out. Okay. Like when somebody's talking to you and they're facing you, you can hear their voice really good. But if they turn their head from you and they talk in a different direction, you can hear them, but it's not as loud. It's not as
it's not as clear.
Clear. You understand? Yeah. So, this thing, when it was chattering like that, like I could hear it just as plain as day, but when it was whooping, like I could feel the vibration from it, you know what I mean? So it had to be hollering at me, you know what I mean? So not unless it was bouncing off the van or something, I don't know.
Yeah. What's your wife think about all this?
At the time, like I said, she was in the floorboard, but
I don't blame her.
Honey, what do you think about it? It just scared her, she says.
Yeah.
What did you think? Did you think
she's welcome to come on if she wants? If she doesn't want to, that's okay.
Here you go. Here, honey. Hold on a minute. She's going to talk to you for a second.
Hello.
Hey, who's this?
This is Mandy.
Hey, Mandy. How are you?
I'm his wife.
Good to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you too.
What did you think of all this, Mandy? I don't blame you for ducking down to the floorboards. I think even your biggest, toughest grown men probably would have done the same thing. What did you think was going on at the time?
Well, I didn't really know what was going on because I had never even really heard of a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, at the time, because I grew up in the city. I didn't grow up in the country like Ronald did. And, my parents I lived a real sheltered life. I didn't really get out and do a lot or, hear about stuff like that. And, at first I just thought that it was, there was, like he was saying, there's houses that were around his dad's house, but the nearest one was, way down the road. And I asked Ronald at first, I was like, why is the neighbor, running past the van? And he was like, what? And, that's how it really started. I thought, I was like, what in the world is going on? And then, like right after it ran past the van on my side, that's when we heard the first, that whooping and hollering noise. And it just really scared me, Yeah, and I just really didn't have any idea what was going on until Ronald said something about it after we got back in the house. I just knew that I was scared because he was scared. Anytime that he gets scared, I get even more scared because he's usually the one that's not scared, and he, tries to calm me down. And since he was scared too, I was like really scared.
Yeah, and then for it to come back to when you were trying to sleep, and start throwing rocks at the house, and that's kind of what they do. That's kind of their behavior. And, I'm so glad that you guys made it out, alive and well, and no one was harmed, because the situation could have gone bad really quick.
Yeah, and just like you all were talking about, people thinking, that Sasquatches are like nice and cuddly and stuff. Like last night we were laying here and I was talking to Ronald. I was telling my husband, I was like, why couldn't you just get a baby one and play with it? And he was like, oh no, that would never happen. He was like, they're always with the mama, there's always a big one that protects her. And I was like, well, what if you just went up to him real nice and, you know, tried to talk to him or help him? And he was like, no, don't ever try to do that. You know?
Well, you guys learned that firsthand, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Mandy, very much. And thank you again for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good night.
You too, sweetheart.
Hello.
Yeah, Ronnie, that was an amazing account, man. And as I was just telling your wife, you know, thank God that it didn't go bad, you know, because this situation could have gone a lot worse. And you guys were on the tip of the iceberg of this going really, really bad, really, really quick. And who knows knows what the deal with that Sasquatch was. Obviously, it had some agenda. I think it wanted you guys out of the van. I think it wanted to run you guys down. You know, I know relationships with your dad isn't the best. I'm curious to see if it's still going on there. Hopefully he's okay. And it was just a passing moment. Generally in these situations, they're not just a passing moment, especially on a property. They're around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, too, if your dad knew more than what he said. Do you get that impression that your dad probably knew more than what he said?
I think he does, but I mean, like I said, I mean, he's a quiet type, you know what I mean, and he's just a loner, you know what I mean. He's kind of like a hermit or whatever, you know. And I tell you what, to give you an idea, like literally, Wes, and this is no joke. In the summertime, you know, when the chickens hatch off, chickens jump through my dad's windows and they go in his house and they roost in his closet. If that'll give you an idea, you know what I mean? Like, he's just a backwoods, you know, hillbilly that don't, you know, get out. I mean, he's not a big talkative person, you know what I mean? And, like I said, I mean, I would say more than likely, you know, if he would sit down and open up and talk to you, I mean, I'd say he'd probably tell you some stories that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, you know. But getting him to do it's like, you know, pulling teeth.
Yeah, it usually is with country folk. Usually it is. And usually they know more. That's what I think your dad's reaction is what surprises me. He'll fire off shots. He runs out. He's running right towards it. Get out of here. It kind of makes me wonder if he's seen this thing before or if he's dealt with it before. Yeah. And I'm just assuming. And, you know,
right.
You know what assuming get you.
You know, you would think, I mean, because when I lit that up with the brake lights, I mean, it lit up like a Christmas tree, you know what I mean? And I know he seen what he was running toward, you know what I mean? So whether he put that out of his mind because I was his kid or something like that, maybe, you know, and he was just running into harm's way to try to protect me, you know what I mean, and my wife, or he just, you know, he didn't care, you know, and it's something that he'd dealt with before in the past or something like that, like, you know, like dogs in the trash, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
I don't know, but you know, when I talked to him, when he was telling me, when he was explaining right there when we found those chicken feathers, and he was like, you know, that damn thing got my chickens, you know what I mean? It was like that he had problems with it, you know, getting chickens before or something other, you know what I mean?
Like he wasn't surprised it took a chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm just glad that it worked out the way it did. I mean, it's too bad you guys had to go through it, but at the end of the day, no one got hurt, and that's what's important.
No one got hurt. Yeah. But like I said, I mean, you know, after the encounter, like, you know, I was still worried about my dad not knowing that it was me and her coming up to the porch, you know what I mean, and shooting us, you know.
Well, it's smart.
You know, I mean, yeah.
You know, in high intense situations when some guy's, you know, firing off shots, I don't blame you for calling him out, you know, and saying, hey, it's us coming up. You know, it's smart.
Yeah. You know, Wes, I want to commend you, man, for you know, your show and stuff like that, and the homework that you do, you know, getting this out there on the radio and stuff like that. You know, people need to understand about these things, you know what I mean? And they don't need to listen to everybody, you know what I mean? And, you know, because people can lead them down a wrong path, you know what I mean? And can get them hurt, you know. You know, I want people to be safe, and I want them to understand that, you know, these things need to be handled with caution, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, if, you know, handle them with the same care that you do a grizzly bear, but 10 times more. You know what I mean?
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Give them plenty of room. You know what I mean? Give them plenty of room. You know, don't try to invoke them. I mean, if you see one, stay away from it. You know what I mean? You know, if you see a female and a young one or something like that, stay away from them. You know what I mean? Especially, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that logic. I couldn't agree more. And Ronnie, and thank you again for all the kind words. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing the encounter that happened to you and your wife and your dad. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. Have a good one.
And next up, I want to welcome Shane to the show. Shane, thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thank you, Wes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. And I know that you and actually your whole family had an encounter. I know your little boy got a good look at it. If you would you kind of start from the beginning? Tell us what you were out doing and walk us into what happened.
So we were just taking a family camp trip. My 13-year-old son, my 9-year-old son, and my wife. And we were in a pretty remote area in southwest Idaho. The mountain range that we were in is pretty rocky. It's not really a wooded mountain range. There's a lot of mining in that area from like the 1800s and early turn of the century. So the mines are all abandoned, lots of caves, lots of rocky, cliffy areas, as well as high shale, steep slopes covered with rock everywhere, lava. And so not a lot of people are attracted to go up there. We like it because of that. So we go up there about every couple of years. We'll go up and do a family camp out up there. So this particular time was fall. It was September. Had not started getting cold yet last year in 2017. And we had a retired military Humvee with the doors off. And we have also a military Humvee trailer that we put a pop-up tent on and all of our supplies on the trailer. So as we were headed out, all of us were in the Humvee, and as we got close to the mountain range, the road that I intended on taking, I could not find the access point. And so we went down to another trailhead and went ahead and took that one. This one was a lot rockier than what I intended, and I really didn't want to take it because my wife was pretty susceptible to lots of bumps. She doesn't care for that. And the trail that we ended up taking was also pretty overgrown. Four-wheelers can sneak up it without any problem, but the Humvee is pretty wide, and so there was a lot of overgrowth, bushes and little, saplings along the side of the trail on both sides, and they would slap you as you would go through them. They would whip across your face, and she was getting rather tired of that. But as we entered the canyon area, where we actually had the sighting, we got to a point where it basically follows the creek up this rocky canyon. It's steep both sides. There's no way in or out other than to go from one end of the canyon to the other end of the canyon. And usually there's a creek running. The creek was dry because it was late in the fall. And so as we started up this little area, she became rather annoyed with the bushes slapping her face. So she really wanted to get out and walk. Now, with the Humvee and this terrain being so rocky, we were only traveling about 3 to 4 miles an hour. So it was a long creepy haul up through that, creeping over the rocks, because it beats you to death if you went very fast. So we got to an area where there was some trees that had actually overgrown over the trail far enough that we couldn't get the Humvee in. So we stopped, and my wife, and my 9-year-old exited the Humvee and started walking up the trail. They wanted to try and get a little distance on us so that she didn't have to have the bushes slapping her in the face. So we got the chainsaw out, my 13-year-old and I, and we went to town on some of these branches. and cleaned them up and got them out of the way so we could get the Humvee through. And we were probably there for 20 minutes cutting the limbs. So they were about 600 yards ahead of us, and which I didn't know at the time how far ahead of us. But as we entered that valley, it's not a real wide valley. It's very, the bottom of the valley where the creek is, it's pretty much just wide enough for a truck and the creek. So it's not like it's a big wide open valley. This is a tight little corridor. As we entered that, before I ever got out to cut the trees, I had that feeling of being watched. And I had felt that one time before, but I didn't see anything, and I was pretty mindful of where I was driving because there's a lot of big rocks, like, basketball and beach ball sized rocks that you can hit if you're not watching. And so I was paying attention to that, and I was also looking up the canyon walls. And I just had that creepy feeling that I'm being watched. And it's not a good feeling. It isn't like, oh, hey, yeah, there might be somebody else out here. It's kind of a scary, people, say evil, and that's how it feels. It feels like there's an evil thing
kind of
around.
menacing, a menacing type feeling.
Yeah, and it kind of plays on your fears, and it definitely gives you, the hair stands up on the back of your neck. Anyway, I normally, obviously would not ever let my family get into a position where they were in danger. But we had been going down that trail for about 3 miles, and those bushes and stuff were whipping her in the face. So I reluctantly said, okay, you can walk ahead. I didn't think they would get very far. I didn't think it would take us very long to clear the trail. And it didn't, but it was long enough they could get up there. So we put the chainsaw away and moved the branches and got in the truck and started heading up the trail. We got up, like I said, about 600 yards up the trail, and there was a turn in the trail. And so they were out of my sight in about 10 minutes. I couldn't see them anymore as I was clearing debris. So we got in and started driving up. When we got up there and turned the corner, and it kind of opens up where there's no more big trees, but they're just tall bushes, like giant sagebrush and just brush. It's not really trees. And on the one side, on the slope where the creek was, that went up about 1,500 feet, and it was just pure shale. There was a sporadic bush once in a while, but it was pretty much, 1,500 feet tall and 300 or 400 yards long of just shale, nothing up there. And on the other side, there was some heavier brush and bush. And I've been down this trail 1,000 times. It was super common, but I think it's less common now because the other roads are better. So I don't think as many people go down. But as we come around the corner, I stopped, and they were ahead of me, and they had just started turning around and walking back to me. My 9-year-old was ahead of my wife by about 30 feet or so. He had gotten up just ahead of her. And the brush on both sides was about 9 to 10 feet tall. So it was, you're kind of, you feel a little isolated in that brush when you're driving down the road. You can't really see over it. Well, if you're in a vehicle, you have a better chance, but you can't see anything except the upper walls of the canyon. So they started walking back, and my little boy just ran right to me and about that, and hugged me. And about that time, my wife goes, hey, we just saw something in the brush. And she hopped in the car, or in the Humvee, like, she just immediately hopped in there. And I said, well, what do you mean you just saw something? And she said, well, something walked across the road in front of us, and it was brown. And I turned around just in time to see it walk into the brush. And I said, well, where did it walk across? And she pointed, and that brush was about 10 to 12 feet tall in that area. And it was encroaching over the road on both sides. So, if something walked in there, you wouldn't be able to see it. Even though we're in a really desert climate, this particular little area was very dense. So I said, okay. And she said, I don't feel good about this. We need to go. So I said, okay. I put my 13-year-old, who has driven that Humvee 1,000 times, I put him up on the driver's seat. and said, "Can you drive up through here? Just go nice and easy." And I had a 45 pistol, and I had one magazine with 10 rounds. So I was obviously not very prepared. I didn't know what I was dealing with yet. I just knew what I was feeling, and then how my wife reacted and my 9-year-old. So he started driving. I got up on top of the Humvee and just stood up on top because we were going slow enough. I could just stand up there. And my 9-year-old crawled up there, and I said, "Did you see what Mom saw?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what did you see?" And he said, "Well, I was in front of Mom and about 10 feet in front of me." And he didn't say 10 feet. He just pointed, so I knew about how far he was. And he said, this big man stood up, and he had hair on him, and he walked across the road and into the bushes. And I said, "Did Mom see that?" And he said, "I don't think so. She turned around when you guys came around the corner, and she looked away, and then she turned back around just when it walked through the brush." And I said, "Well, was it a deer?" And he said, "It was walking on 2 feet, and it looked like a man, a big, hairy man." Now, this is from the position of a 9-year-old. So when he described it that way, it was pretty obvious what he saw. He wasn't making it up. He wasn't really afraid, which was kind of surprising. He ran to me, but after he and I were on the truck, he didn't seem afraid. And I said, "Okay, well, you just stay close to me. I don't want you to fall off or anything. You stay right close to me." And I had my gun out and just had it in front of my waistline, pointed, off the trail. But I wasn't pointing it around. I just had it up against me so that it was visible. So if something was looking back at me, it was very visible that I had a weapon. As we moved a little bit out of that, we started coming to the close of the canyon. That feeling started to go away. Now, we camped about 1.5 miles from there, and I was just a nervous wreck the whole rest of the weekend. We never saw anything, and I never had that feeling come back. But it was just not, I just felt so unprepared, and here we're in a tent. Those things, I don't know. It was just a very, not a good feeling. It was definitely, I was out of my realm there.
No, I get it. Yeah, it's unnerving, it's... You have a 9-year-old tell you he saw a big, tall, hairy man just get out and walk through this brush you're talking about, and, what are you supposed to think? Thank God it wasn't aggressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I was out of sight. It could have snagged him and been gone before we even turned the corner to see them. When she flipped around to see us, it could have snagged him and gone. They could have been on the other side of the canyon by the time we even looked around the area. And I at first it kind of caught me off guard, just because when reality sinks in and you think, "Oh, okay, obviously I was feeling that for a reason. I was feeling all those hard feelings and fear and that anxiety that comes from that. I was feeling that for a reason. I was feeling watched. And here this is. I'm sure they're watching us the whole time coming up that canyon. It was, they have the high ground on every side. So we're putting around up that canyon 3 miles an hour. They can, watch everything we're doing. And here we're clearing trees with a chainsaw. We can't hear them. Even if they were screaming, we couldn't have heard them over the chainsaw. So I don't know, it was pretty unnerving once I got out there and really assessed what had happened. It was very, very unnerving. I really didn't want to stay, but everybody else wanted to stay. And to this day, my wife does not. She will not concede what it was. She thinks it's a deer. And I said, "Well, those bushes, they were taller than the Humvee. Do you think that deer was as tall as those bushes? 10 feet tall? Is that?"
Did your wife see it? Did she look back and actually see the creature?
She said she saw something brown go into the bushes. That's what she saw. And she said it was as tall as the bushes. That's how I knew it was as tall as the bushes. My 9-year-old said it stood up on 2 feet and walked across the trail and into the bushes, and it was a big brown hairy man.
Well, what's interesting too about the encounter is the fact that it kind of waited for your wife to turn and look down the opposite direction. Then it decided to get up, and you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot with people who run into these things. They'll say, "I'm looking through my binoculars, And there it is right there. And then the moment they kind of turn away, then look back, it's gone. And it's very common behavior with these things. And like I said, not every encounter is going to be aggressive. In some situations, it's not. And I think in this situation, it was just going from point A to point B, because it could have caused a major, major problem for you guys. And then for your son to say it's a big hairy man. I find interesting when we talk to little kids, from 9 younger, they know what a bear is. I mean, there's no fooling a little kid. They know what a bear is. And if you ask them directly, was that a bear? Was that a deer? They're very straight up with you on what they saw. And for him to see this big hairy guy, this big hairy man, that's very telling.
There was one other thing that I failed to mention. When you relive it, you kind of, you put yourself right back. I mean, as I'm telling this, I'm not getting choked up or anything, but it does create a lot of anxiety in you when you start to talk about it. And even though I didn't see it, I had a pretty good idea what was happening. And so that created a lot of anxiety because my wife had no idea what was happening. And my kids didn't have any idea what was happening. And when you're the dad and you're the protector, and you have one cruddy little 45, that's all that's going to do is make them mad. That's not a defensive weapon for that kind of a scenario. And they had the high ground. I mean, it couldn't have been a more perfect scenario for them had they got aggressive at all. And so it was very, it was bad. The one thing that I failed to mention was, because I've asked my wife this several times, because she'll flat out deny, that, because she doesn't really believe in that stuff at all. And she told me that as soon as she saw that thing going through the brush, a big rock came rolling down. Now, when she got in the truck, she didn't tell me that till later. When she got in the truck and we started moving and I got up on top, big rocks kept coming down. And we're talking 200-300 pounders. Now, this hillside is shale. And if people know what shale it's a thinner type of a slab of rock. It isn't a round boulder. Shale is flat. And so it doesn't roll. It'll slide unless you put it on its end and go end to end, on its edge. It doesn't really roll. And these things were coming down like that. They were coming down end to end. And they went clear down the hill into the creek bed. And I only saw a couple of them come down. The problem was, every time I looked up there, I could not find where they originated from. I couldn't tell by the time I heard them and then caught them out of the corner of my eye, because I was scanning both sides of the canyon that we were in. And there was some brush on the one side, and it was all I could do. I just was maxed out trying to watch everything. And when those things started coming down, I looked up there and I couldn't see anything. I could not see. And there was nothing on that hillside, a few brush here and there, but there was nothing up there. So I don't know where they came from. If they threw them off the top, I don't know. But it was enough. I was ready to get out of there as fast as I could. And I was glad that.
I don't blame you. And like I said, thank God it wasn't aggressive, just wanted to get from point A to point B. Your feelings are usually right. If you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. And it probably sat there and watched you guys for probably all day and then was just trying to make its way back up. That's what I think what was going on in this situation. Because again, if it wanted your son, it would have taken him. There'd have been nothing you could have done about it. And your wife, he would have been gone before your wife even knew what happened. But it doesn't sound like the creature didn't mean any harm or anything. It just was moving from point A to point B.
Right. And I hadn't thought about that until you brought that up, because I think, as from first person's view, from my situation, I was gleaning what little bit of information that my family was giving me. I was looking at our scenario. I knew what I was feeling and what I had been feeling the whole time we entered that little canyon. I knew enough to be alarmed and to know that I'm outgunned and I'm outmatched in this canyon with this little family. And, it was not a good scenario. I was glad when we got out of that canyon that everything changed, because the feeling went away, and I never had it the rest of the weekend. But you feel so powerless when you know you got this little teeny pop gun And that's it. That's your only defense, and that's only your defense. They could pop me with a rock and I would never even see it, or what I mean. There's just, I don't know. It was not good. And you think about it 100,000 different ways after the fact. At the time, you're full of adrenaline. You're just trying to get out of there. You're assessing things the best you can. But when you think about it later, that's when the real nerve things come in.
I chuckle because I know exactly. Yeah, I laugh, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. I just laugh because I know exactly what you mean. The worst thing that you have after an encounter is time and quiet to sit and think about it. It's the worst torture there is. You know what I mean? And so I get completely what you're saying. I really don't think this creature meant you or your family any harm. I think it honestly was just kind of moving along. Did your son give you any other details besides tall, hairy man walking across the road?
He just said it was fast. He didn't say anything like it took one step. He didn't say anything like that. He just said it stood up from the one side of the trail and just stepped across the road, kind of a trail/road, but he just stepped across and into the brush. And he didn't say if he saw its face. I tried to ask him as many questions as I could. I could probably go back and ask him some more questions. He handled it really good, and he didn't show any fear at the time at all, which was crazy because I thought he would have been freaked out, but he didn't. But we've had some other things happen later, and so I haven't really wanted to bring it up again just because at night, he has a hard time sleeping at night, and his little brain, his brother shows him scary movies or whatever, and then he has a hard time sleeping. So I'm somewhat afraid to bring it up and talk to him about it in depth in case I don't know, I should, but
a lot of times
a little kid. So.
No, I get it. And a lot of times you treat kids the same way you do adults. And that's how I've always talked to kids when they call me or their parents put them on the phone. I'll talk to them the same way I will an adult. And a lot of times the less questions you ask, the better. And I know it's kind of a technique I use on the podcast, but it's true. If you just ask a simple question, then shut up and let someone talk, you would be amazed how much they will tell you. And I know sometimes it's not so descriptive with kids, but sometimes with kids I've noticed, and I've noticed this from talking to adults and kids, a lot of times if you start asking too many questions to a kid, they get flustered. It almost feels like and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, Shane. I'm just saying it becomes more of, it feels like an interrogation. And so the less you can make it feel like an interrogation and more of just, hey, what did you, was there any details? And a lot of times they'll start spilling out the guts. The thing though with kids is too, it doesn't shock me he wasn't scared. It's the strangest thing, man. I've talked to so many kids, I can't even tell you, under the age of 10 that have had these things come up through their window. And they'll tell you all day long, all sorts of details. Your situation's a little bit different, but in some of these situations, I think if an adult had been standing there, saw this creature cross a road, the normal reaction is to scream and run the other direction. Kids don't do that. They'll stand there and watch it. And just like your son did. And so, I would go easy on him. Don't drill him too hard. He may not remember too many details, but because it was probably like 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. It's in the brush and it's gone.
It's over.
Yeah, it's over. But
and typically his behavior is not to run to me. Typically, because he generally gleans more to his mother. He usually gravitates more towards her. And this time he ran right to me and grabbed my leg, which was, I could tell he had some anxiety, but he didn't seem to be afraid. And as we talked, because that experience was still happening for at least another 20 minutes to get out of that canyon. So we were in that canyon for about an hour. And the whole time after we were on top of the Humvee and we were headed out, I was asking him as many questions as I could at the time and still keep my wits about me because, I'm putting stuff together that he doesn't understand. And I'm thinking, oh, gee, this is bad. And so I probably could have asked him a few more questions. Maybe he would remember now. He's pretty resilient. I told you earlier, and this is probably something that you wouldn't typically bring up. I am going to, just because this one particular thing. We actually had somebody break in our house last week, and they came through his window. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I heard, because our room has an adjoining wall, and I heard the bumps in that room. Well, he doesn't sleep good at night, and so and his TV was going, and I just assumed he was up, moving around on his bed or whatever, watching TV, because the wall bumped about 3 times. And I was mad because he keeps me up a lot at night because he blasts his TV. So I thought, I'm not going to go in there because I'm just going to be mad if I go in there. So I didn't go in there, and it got quiet again. The next morning I came in, and I had started the vehicles up so they could warm up. I came in, and he said, "Dad, I have to tell you something. It's serious, and I need you to listen." Now, this is a 9-year-old, right? And I said, "Okay." So he sat down at the kitchen table. This is at 7 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Somebody broke into my room last night." And he was very articulate and detailed about it. He did not cry. He didn't, but he told me so many details, and I don't need to bore everybody with it. But my point is, this kid, when he gets under duress, he holds it together really well. So I probably shouldn't fear talking to him about it. I just, when you're 9 and somebody breaks into your room and you see a Sasquatch and I don't know what his little breaking point is. So I'm a little cautious, but I believe him. I believe him because he has so much fact when he talks, and what a horrible situation to be in as a 9-year-old for either one of them. But he's a little trooper. My kids are pretty tough kids, and it's amazing.
Sounds like it.
At the same time, it's totally scary,
Yeah,
I keep a shotgun, my 45, and an AR-15 within 2 feet of my bed. So I'm ready to rock and roll at any point. But here a guy, it just, I don't know. You're out of your realm when you go up against these things.
Did they catch the guy that broke into your house?
No, they have no leads, no anything. He was in the room for about 45 minutes, looked through all of his drawers, looked at him, stared at him for, Porter said, it felt like forever, Dad. And he stared at him, and then he walked around the bed, crawled back out the window, and shut the window. And
creepy. That's creepy, man.
Yeah, I said, "Why didn't you come wake us up?" And he goes, "I was too scared. I didn't want to get out of the bed. I didn't know if he was standing right there waiting for me to get up. I didn't know." Horrible little thing, but
terrible thing.
He was brave about it. He sleeps in his bed every night. We keep that window locked, obviously, but I don't know. I think I'm a pretty tough guy because I'm not really afraid of people. I don't really have a natural fear of animals and things, but there's I'm not afraid at all of, and it sounds stupid and cocky, but we don't have any problem. If somebody wants to come up, we're going to run out. And I've had people break in before, and I've chased them off, and it's never been a problem. I'm not afraid of that. This thing in the county or the canyon, that was different. It was. I tell you, I felt like a scared rabbit on top of that thing, and I'm not afraid of things. But that was a different. My kid could have been gone. My wife could have been gone. I mean, that thing could have packed her off. It could have packed both of them off, one under each arm. She's a $130. She doesn't weigh anything. Like, you could have snagged both of them and been gone.
Yeah.
It was not a fun feeling. I will say that we are in the market for a Barrett.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
We're not going to mess around next time. We just got to go prepared. I don't know. I can't just stop going to the mountains forever just because we've had a bad experience. And it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't even a bad experience, really. Nothing happened, but it could have. The whole scenario was set up to be able to be bad, and it didn't, but, it just makes you feel so weak. Paralyzed almost.
No, I get it. As you get older, you start realizing the less control you have over your life. You think you're in such control in your early 20s, right. And the older you get, you start to realize you have control over nothing. And so I'm glad it didn't frighten your son. I'm glad you guys are still going out there, still doing your thing. Like I said, I really don't think this creature meant you guys any harm. I think it was looking to cross. It was trying to get from point A to point B. Looked for an opportunity to cross,
soon as you're coming up, your wife turns, it's a perfect opportunity to get across that road. And I really think that's all that happened. I don't think you had any interest in your kid. I don't think it was probably curious of what you guys were doing with the chainsawing. You know, you'd mentioned that feeling of being watched,
Right.
and you probably were. You know, it probably was sitting there watching you guys all day, and probably more than one sitting there watching you guys all day. But I don't think they honestly meant you any harm or meant your kid any harm. Now, does that mean that that's how it goes every time? No. But in this situation, I really don't. I think it was just trying to get from point A to point B and wanted really the less contact with you, the better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was really glad when you said that. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. So when you said that, I was thinking, oh, that makes more sense, actually, because, you know, the more experience you have listening to people's experiences, the more time you spend learning about these things, you realize how fast things can turn ugly, how powerful, how fast they are, how aggressive they can be. And so, you know, when you have something like that happen and you got your little family out there, it really is, it's quite unnerving just because you realize that you don't have any control over it. So I'm glad you said that because it makes me feel a lot better about the intent, you know, what was really happening. It wasn't me fending them off. They just didn't care. They just, you know, were observing, but not.
They just want to move along and not really. Yeah, and I think sometimes in situations, especially if you're out hiking, hunting, sometimes doing your normal stuff, a lot of times I'll tell people, if you get that feeling like you're being watched, you probably are. And if it makes you uncomfortable, turn around and leave. Because you probably are being watched. And it probably is most likely one of these things or another human watching you. Most likely one of these things. But again, I really don't think there was any ill intent in this encounter. I think it just, you know, when you hear encounters with these creatures, you can almost put a people personality to them. You know, some people are cool. Some people you can joke around with, some people you can mess with, and they're just cool. Other times, you look at someone wrong and they're going to come right up and rip your throat out, you know, and for no reason. And a lot of times it's the same thing with these creatures. I think they have the same personalities as humans in the sense of sometimes you might run across one that's cool, it's got no problem, just was trying to make its way. Then other times you're a meal, your son's a meal, and it's going to do whatever it wants to you. And so you never really know. I think in most cases, that's why I tell people, you get a different reaction from these creatures when you're by yourself. Even if realize that your family wasn't an army backing you up, you know, your wife and your kids, but a lot of times there's safety in numbers. I don't think they're really sure what to do when there's more than one person. I think it makes them leery. And even if it's a child and women and a larger group, I think makes them a little leery. You know, it's a cool thing your son saw. At least he got a chance to actually see one.
You know, a lot of people have horrific encounters that you interview. You know, we listen to you all the time, and a lot of them are really bad. Whether it's a person that's by themselves or a person that's in a group, a family group or whatever, whether they're in a nice enclosed camp trailer, you know, something somewhat solid versus a tent, and whether you're 1,000 miles from nowhere or you're right outside your backyard, it's I mean, it could just always go either way, and you don't know what you've done to aggravate them. You know, I was thinking, oh man, the stupid chainsaw, I probably ticked them off because I was running the chainsaw. You know, you go over 1,000 things in your mind afterwards. But as we were getting out of there, I was quite angry. Because you kind of go from that feeling of fear to, okay, I got to defend myself, and you better buck up, and you better take a defensive position now instead of, even though I knew I had limited resources to use, I still had to take a defensive position. And so, I don't know, I feel bad for a lot of these people. I'm glad that's all it was. But, you know, once you've had the experience, you are definitely a very different person. And I just feel horrible for some of these poor people. I feel bad for you and what your experience. it would have been horrible. That many of those things crawling around your car, as big as they are, as fast as they move, and they could have flipped that car open, ripped the doors off. You just don't know what you've done to tick them off, or what somebody else did. I mean, what if somebody else took a shot at them earlier that day, and now they're ticked, and you just happen to be the poor schmuck, sitting on the side of the road, and they're mad, So, yeah, I don't know. All those things go through your head, but anyway, I'm glad that's all it was.
Yeah, no, I'm glad there wasn't anything major. But I appreciate you coming on, Shane. Thank you so much for sharing the encounter that happened to you and your family, and be safe out there as always. But thank you for sharing it.
Thanks for having such a great program and allowing us, the population, to express some of these things, because it does help when you have an outlet, because most people don't believe you. So we appreciate you too. And our kids are huge fans. We listen to you every day.
Nice.
So thank you, Wes.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. Tell your boys I said hi. I hope they enjoy hearing their dad on the show. And thank you again for coming on, Shane.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Shane. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
This is my home.